Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle. I'm joined today by White House reporter Haisten Willis. Haisten, we're entering the home stretch for the midterm elections. President Biden's trying to make his closing argument, and a big part of it is what the Republicans will do to the economy. What sort of things has he and his subordinates at the White House been saying?
Democratic strategists have encouraged Biden and other Democrats to start talking more about the economy in the closing stages of the midterms. They focus more on Donald Trump, abortion, student loans, climate change, other things in the last few months. But they're starting to realize they need to talk more about the economy as the campaign draws to a close. So, as you said, he's talking more about economic issues and specifically kind of going negative, I guess, talking about what Republicans would do if they win control of Congress. He's saying they will go after your Medicare, they will go after your Social Security, they will do trickle-down economics, and not just trickle-down economics, MAGA trickle-down economics, if I said that correctly. So really going out there and talking about what the opponents or what the other side would do if they took control.
Because it's sort of interesting, because on the one hand, obviously, it could motivate people to go out and vote for Democrats, which is what they're trying to do. They're trying to make people feel that this is a choice election, not a referendum on Biden, trying to get them to feel that there would be consequences to giving Republicans majorities. But it also would let him, if the Republicans do win, Biden can kind of pivot to keep using this kind of talk to just go after the Republican congressional majorities for the next couple of years.
Well, that's an interesting point, and a reporter brought that up just a while ago to the press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, saying, well, if Republicans did do any of these things, couldn't Biden just veto whatever it was they did? But she kind of echoed the line that Biden's given about how he's dangerous, how they're dangerous, how they want to make the economy worse and not better. Just kind of going more like a fear route, I guess. These are people to be feared. They could do damaging things. They're not talking as much about the economy, like how they're going to grow or shrink GDP, but like on a very personal level. Social Security, Medicare, those things will get worse and be cut potentially.
Since at least it looks like the polls, one of the reasons why Democrats are doing poorly is that there has been this hyper focus on the economy, and Biden and company have tried to change the subject to other issues, and it's clear they've concluded in the final weeks that this doesn't work.
Yeah, polls have shown consistently the top voter concerns are the inflation and the economy. That's what voters are worried about. And Biden and the White House do have things they can talk about that are positive. They can say unemployment is low. They said they created 10 million jobs since they took office, and those things are true. But there's also some political wisdom that talking about how great the economy is not going to work if someone doesn't really think that, right? If they're going to the gas station and seeing the gas price higher, they're seeing the price of eggs higher at the grocery store, hearing about how low unemployment is not going to work for them. So that's where they're kind of going again after Republicans kind of going on the attack, on the offensive against them.
So as there's been more evidence that the school closings during the pandemic had some adverse effects on educational outcomes, the White House has been pretty out front in trying to distance Democrats from those decisions, saying that really the White House played a pretty big role in the schools being able to reopen. But a lot of people associate the teachers' unions, a major Democratic constituency, with those closures. Talk a little bit about how the White House has tried to walk this line.
This has been really interesting to watch as we're now really getting fully the pandemic, as far as the really acute phase of the pandemic, is firmly in the rearview now. And we're starting to see some of the effects of this, see some data come out. There have been a number of different reports released about school test scores among fourth graders and eighth graders, and they've shown sharp declines across the board in reading and math. And so now, again, with this being all in hindsight, it's sort of a, it can be some finger pointing, who's to blame. And the Republicans have been very firm about teachers' unions wanted to shut down schools, Democrats wanted to shut down schools, and the data certainly backs them up as far as who was in remote school longer versus who was doing in-person learning longer. And so the White House, as you said, has started to kind of distance themselves from their previous messaging about wanting to be safe and not be in school versus saying, oh, actually, we were in favor, we wanted to get schools open, we just needed to pass the American Rescue Plan first, and things like that.
So the president has been very critical of a voting law in your home state. Georgia, but we've seen some of the information now on early voting, and turnout looks pretty good. So some have asked whether the White House should apologize for some of what they've said about this law, but the White House isn't saying they're sorry.
Another case of hindsight of things that happened in 2020 and 2021 and how those things are now playing out at the end of 2022. So, right, Georgia passed a voter integrity law, is one of a number of Republican-led states that did that following the 2020 election, and Democrats really again went on the offensive, talking about how terrible this was. Joe Biden made several allusions to segregation,
Right.
Jim Crow. I think he called it Jim Crow
2.0.
Jim Crow on steroids, Jim Crow in the 21st century.
Right.
So a lot, very strong. This is about Jim Crow, right?
Right.
This is voter suppression, all these things. He made a big fiery speech in Atlanta in January, also along those lines. They use that as the impetus for a push on voting rights laws that ultimately was not successful in Congress. Well, now voting has started in Georgia, early voting, and the numbers are way up. There are many more people voting early in 2022 than there were in 2018. It's supposed to be on par actually with the presidential election 2 years ago, which of course presidential elections, right, more people tend to vote in those.
Sure.
So there's a big contradiction there, right? You're saying it's voter suppression and it's Jim Crow, the numbers are out and voting is way up. So they were asked this week if Joe Biden needed to apologize or retract his statement. And Karine Jean-Pierre basically said no. She said that the evidence of higher voting turnouts does not necessarily mean that there was no voter suppression. She said they could both exist at the same time.
And this is all happening against the backdrop of a governor's race where Stacey Abrams is in a rematch with now Governor Brian Kemp. And Stacey Abrams has made pretty central to her message and to her political identity that there was voter suppression in the last race that she ran, and that voter suppression is a major issue that needs to be addressed. And now it looks like the turnout doesn't bear that, and maybe her poll numbers don't look as good as they looked the last time around.
Yeah, Stacey Abrams herself made a big part of her last campaign and this campaign about the idea of voter suppression. So again, these high voter turnout numbers in Georgia don't necessarily look good for her as well.
Right.
She became really an even bigger star after losing the last election based on this idea of voter suppression and fighting voter suppression. She launched a group, Fair Fight Action. She was even supposedly in the running to be a vice presidential nominee along with Joe Biden in 2020. Her star rose that high, right?
Sure.
And but the high numbers that we're seeing now don't really bear that out.
So I guess we'll have to see if Abrams tanks.
We will see.
Thank you, Haisten. You can read Haisten and the rest of our political team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.